In Psalm 34, David says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. Imagine for a minute when young David faced Goliath of Gath. If we imagine ourselves in his place when he chose to defy the invincible giant at the Valley of Elah, fear surely comes to mind. Goliath was a well-known champion, prepared for battle and armed with the strongest and heaviest equipment, which made him victorious every time. Behind him there was the large and powerful army of the Philistine. And there stood David, facing the most challenging situation any young man can possibly face. Behind David there was an army too scared to defend him, and even astonished by his bravery. Around him there were incredulous voices saying he could never win such a battle against the giant. Many of us have experienced similar situations at some point in our lives. We may not have fought physically against the giant in a battlefield, but giants come in all shapes and sizes. There have been times we found ourselves overwhelmed by seemingly impossible situations. Like David, we looked so small and unprepared to win a battle. Fear is more than a concern. Fear is a reaction, and it can deeply affect us. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of tomorrow, fear of lack, and so on. Fear comes in all shapes and sizes. We all have experienced fear, and we all have faced giants. There is much to learn with David when facing giants. David was a man after God's own heart. In Psalm 23, David says, Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for your rod and staff, they will comfort me. There was a certainty in David's heart, a total assurance of God's presence and protection. God's rod and staff had saved him many times before, and the Lord who had rescued him from the claws of the lion and the bear would rescue him from that giant, as he says in 1 Samuel. Instead of fear, David saw Goliath as a challenge. And instead of running away like the others, he ran towards the battle line to meet the Philistine, as the Bible tells us. Who could defy the army of the living God, he said. When we are conscious of God's rod and staff guiding and protecting us during the most challenging times, we know we are not alone. We have the greatest and the strongest ally on our side. God's rod and staff represents his guidance and his protection and his love. Like David, we don't need an armor or helmet or the sword of man. With God's staff and 5 small stones, we move forward and are ready to defy any giant who may charge against us. As David said, the Lord saves not with sword and spear. With a sling and a stone, he prevailed over the giant, because the battle is the Lord's. Fear is the thought we cannot do it. It is too big. It is too serious. It is too final. But God says, my spirit remains in you. Do not fear. This is the reassurance we need from him. Our Almighty God has the last word on fear. Today the Lord invites us to give him all our fears and put our trust in Him to see us through whatever situation we're facing and however big that giant may seem. He says, "Do not fear, I am with you." The God who protected David, gave him courage, and guided him when facing Goliath, is the same God who is protecting us today and always. God bless you.